Hi, everyone. It looks like we have a few participants here. My name is Michelle Deasy. I'm here with Chris Mayer, and we are going to talk about embedding employability in student learning outcomes. I'm going to go ahead and put some slides up here. Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't put them up yet. Welcome, everyone. Share my slides. Welcome, embedding employability in student learning outcomes. We are very happy to be here. We are from Quality Assurance Commons, also known as QA Commons, and our tagline is employability, mobility, prosperity. So what we're going to do today is we're going to explore how QA Commons' employability framework can help academic programs integrate, assess, and effectively communicate employability-focused student learning outcomes. Tell you our little agenda here. We're going to take a minute to introduce ourselves. We'll talk about, give a little background and context, why employability. We will talk, share with you, what is QA Commons, and then we'll get into really the meat of things with assessing essential employability qualities, what we're learning, and then we would love to do a little Q&A. So I will say hello, I'm Michelle Deasy. I'm the Executive Director of QA Commons. I have been here for at QA Commons for about 6 years. Prior to that, I was working with the RP group, which is the Research and Planning Group for the California Community Colleges. So that was where I kind of got my start in understanding the world of higher education and community colleges in California. And prior to that, I had been actually in the corporate world. So I do have a blend of experiences that I think is helpful in this role because we do sit at that intersection between education and the workforce. And so I have kind of been on both sides of things now. My degrees are in rural sociology and demography. So I do come to this with a little bit of a social science background. And I just love the topic of employability. I think it's very interesting. Chris?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Chris Mayer. I teach philosophy and I lead the philosophy division in the Department of Law and Philosophy at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. I've worked with QA Commons for about 5 years, advising programs on their efforts to enhance student readiness for careers and also in refining the essential employability qualities. I've done some work with assessment of student learning, both, well, at West Point, with the Middle States Accreditor, doing a peer evaluation visit. Then also I was a Teagle Assessment Scholar with Charlie Blake and Kathy Wise, if you know those two. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to sharing what we do today.
All right, well, let's just go for it. And we'll keep our slides up for a while and then we'll get done and hopefully have a little bit more of an interactive discussion. Why employability? So our mission at QA Commons, we are we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we do work nationally. So we sit at kind of the intersection of education and workforce. We're dedicated to upward mobility, ensuring learners are ready for a dynamic workforce and economy. Our focus is employability, and the way we define that, they're the knowledge, skills, and behaviors needed to succeed in any career. Sometimes some people talk about soft skills, transferable skills, things like that. But really, it's often things that are taught less explicitly in education programs, but that are very important to succeeding in a job and a career. We have been around actually since 2016. We started as a project of NCHEMS, the National Center for Higher Education Management Statistics, with a grant from Lumina Foundation. And I think it was about 2019 that we became our own 501c3. So since then, we've worked in 21 states with 49 institutions, 116 programs, and by our calculations, we've reached over 85,000 students. One thing that I think is unique about QA Commons' work is that we focus on the topic of employability, what it takes to use your education and be able to succeed in a job and career. But we don't look at it just from one vantage point. We work with four-year universities. We work with community. All actually in the past year, we have had projects with four-year universities, community colleges, workforce boards and workforce institutions, carceral institutions, or in the prison setting, and K-12 schools. So we have kind of a broad view of things, and feel like we have an interesting perspective on how this all works, how this all fits together. Why it's important, QA Commons may have been a little bit, we started in 2016. It's possible we were a little bit ahead of our time. But in this year in particular is, and last year too, our topic is really kind of gaining momentum. And I think that's because of the growing focus on higher education. What are the value and what are the outcomes of higher education? So we have increasing scrutiny of return on investment of higher education. It's not always something everyone, there are other benefits to higher education as well, but demonstrating this return on investment is something that a lot of people are talking about, and we probably can't ignore. We've seen gainful employability and financial value transparency rules. I believe they're currently primarily in the for-profit education and non-degree program space, but there is a bit of a shift towards to looking at measurable outcomes like earnings, debt levels, and employability. Students, families, and policymakers are demanding real clear evidence on how higher education translates into career success and economic mobility. Before I go into this, I'll say that sometimes I feel like where we were, first we talked about and really focused on getting people into college, so access. And then it moved to, well, let's make sure we got them there. Let's focus on getting them through college. And so we start to do a very good job at that. And I think we're now at this like third tier of, okay, well, to what end? What have we promised in terms of economic benefit? And are we doing a good job of that? So that is something that we address. When we talk about employability, as I mentioned, we're kind of talking about, these soft skills. It's one thing to set up a program on cybersecurity or some technical topic, but there are other things that come into play in the workforce and in career success. They're historically known as soft skills, and now we've kind of gone a little bit. They're not that soft. Actually, they're very difficult, and we talk about employability a little bit more broadly, but we know that 90% of employers believe soft skill. Well, this is what studies tell us. 90% of employers believe soft skills are as important as technical or hard skills. Also, nearly 3 in 4 employers report difficulty in hiring graduates with soft skills they need. And it's interesting to me that, as we get more and more, there's more and more technology in our lives and in the workplace. While on one hand, it's raising the need for better technical skills, alongside that, it's raising the need for human skills, because we no longer need to teach people to execute rote tasks. Computers and robots are doing that. So we need people to be able to use technology and also use their brain along with it. So that's kind of where we see that we are. This is a fun one for me. I just thought it was interesting. We did a project with the American Historical Association, and I got to thinking about the history of soft skills. And it's nothing new. We've been talking about it for a long time, and with slightly different contexts over the decades. But this term was actually originally created by the U.S. Army in the late 1960s, referring to any skill that did not employ the use of machinery. So the military realized that many important activities were, kind of included in this category. There's social skills needed to basically to win wars. It was one thing to have a lot of guns. It's another thing to communicate and work as a team, and they sort of recognize that. And we've seen the same topic be talked about slightly differently in each decade, but still basically the same thing. And it's a difficult topic because a lot goes into it. Um, Right now, I think it's a little bit different than the 1960s, and we're thinking about AI and the future of employability. So we asked ChatGPT, why not? How will AI change the need for employability skills in the workplace? And what it said was, AI will augment human capabilities rather than replace them entirely. Therefore, a combination of technical proficiency, as I was talking about, but also adaptability, creativity, emotional intelligence, ethical reasoning for sure, critical thinking, and domain expertise are going to be vital for individuals to thrive in the AI-driven workplace. So this is a lot of what we are thinking about right now. This is where we feel like we are on this topic. Another, interesting thing is that we looked, this is, well, I guess we're about a year and a half out now, but in 2023, Coursera's job skills of 2023 report was very interesting. They had kind of split it into two sides. So they had the top 10 digital skills, and they found that they varied a lot. Each year those technical skills are varying quite a lot. Actually, it's probably pretty difficult for education providers to keep up with that. By the time you put a program in place, or on to the next technical skill. But those human skills, or as we call them, employability skills, are much steadier, and they tend to remain pretty similar from year to year. They call them evergreen, and I really like that word. Those are the skills that endure, and those are the ones that we focus on. Equity is also very important to us. We know that a college degree does not guarantee equal opportunities for all students. There's pretty strong evidence that underrepresented groups face post-graduation success disparities. And as someone with a sociology background, it makes sense to me. Family background can have a pretty significant impact on the development of, these soft employability skills. People who have professional parents or who have done a lot in the workplace to have certain kinds of role modeling that happens at the dinner table, communication styles, exposure to experiences and knowledge of what opportunities are out there, certainly access to resources. And those things all play a huge role in career success and advancement. And so we know that again, if we're just teaching technical skills and we graduate someone, they are with just those technical skills and without a broader understanding of their expectations as they depart into the real world, there's a lot more for them to learn. So essentially, we know that social and cultural capital is really critical for upward mobility, and they're not necessarily always the focus of academic programs. So what we have is this employability framework. Our organization has changed a lot over the years. We have continued to adapt. That's something that we think is important for students, and we try to do it ourselves. But I will say this employability framework that came from the original work of QA Commons, and QA Commons, I failed to mention, actually came out of the accreditation world. We've shifted a little bit more professional development oriented, but they liked frameworks, and this framework holds up over time, and we have really seen it kind of thrive and be very valuable in numerous different projects. So we have 5 standards of care that we believe are important for education and training providers. One is development of essential employability qualities. I'll go into that in a second. Employer engagement, integrated career support services, student and alumni engagement, and transparency of outcomes, also known as public information. So those are our 5 standards of care. And the biggest standard of care, we do this certification process, and we have one that is weighted the most heavily, and that is number 1, development of essential employability qualities, or as we call them, EEQs. And those are there on the right. I am sure that each one of you could come up with something pretty similar to this list if we gave you about 3 or 4 minutes. And there are about, I don't know, 24 different similar sets of skills out there. And, they all mesh pretty closely. But I think where QA Commons has gone further than many organizations, we've really gotten into the weeds with, well, what does this mean in the workplace? How are we teaching these? How do we teach them differently in a computer science and develop them in a computer science program versus a history program? What does it mean? So we really have a lot of interesting experience and knowledge on how to develop these skills. And with that, I will turn it over to Chris. Oops, I think you're on mute still.
If you go on to the next slide, please,
Yeah,
I'll
oops,
start
thank you.
with um, so when programs are interested in achieving Essential Employability Quality Certification, they contact the QA Commons and they go about submitting the required information we ask for. And I'll talk more about this in subsequent slides, but really how we view the certification and the student employability badging is part professional development, part program enhancement, part student services integration. And so with faculty development, we help faculty see what is already in the curriculum, what is in the co-curricular activities. We look at even policies in terms of classroom policies and policies related to completing the major that also might promote the EEQs. And by introducing the framework to faculty, we also give them a chance to see the qualities that are important for employers and also some effective practices such as alumni and employer engagement that can help them prepare students for employment after graduation. In terms of program enhancement, we help programs holistically look at their offerings and help them better prepare their students for the workforce. So it gives them a sense of looking across all the required courses, all the required activities, even looking at what students are required to do in terms of co-curricular activities, and see where there's gaps and where there's strengths, and learn across the program to see where they can do better and shift efforts. Also helps them see what students are learning in general education, to see how they connect to the EQs. And finally, in terms of student services, we do give the program leadership and the faculty a chance to see what sort of connections their students have to student services in terms of career counseling, what sort of things they're doing in terms of bringing in um, alumni and employers to provide students opportunities to see what's next. And also to maybe open up the possibilities for what they see for students. So not just for a history major, for instance, not just thinking in terms of academic jobs, but also considering the other professions that history majors might go into. Yeah, next slide, please. So Michelle mentioned the five standards of care. This is the standard one, as she mentioned. It is the one that is most heavily weighted. There's five parts to it. Really, this symposium is focused on the third one in terms of assessment of students on each of the EEQs. But during question and answer, we can talk about any of the others that interest you. Um, so we define the EQs as attributes, competencies, and qualities that enable individuals to be successful in the rapidly changing workplace. And as Michelle mentioned, they've been refined over time. But what we find is that many programs are already assessing student learning outcomes that are very similar to the EQs. So I imagine most of your institutions have student learning outcomes related to communication, critical or analytical thinking. If not in majors, digital literacy is probably conducted somewhere in the general education requirements. But then we also see more informal promotion of the EQs in terms of professionalism or learning and adaptability. And sometimes these are in particular assignments and how student learning outcomes are achieved, but also even in course policy, which I'll talk about later. And that we often find professionalism and responsibility are done there. Next slide, please. So as Michelle mentioned, we started as out of an accreditation uh, mindset, but we've really shifted to what we call asset-based coaching. We look at learning outcomes at all levels related to the programs, and we see what and how they connect to the EEQs. We look, instead of looking at and beginning with deficiencies, we begin with what they're already doing, how they're already promoting the EEQs through the learning outcomes that they're seeking to promote, and also in terms of particular assignments and co-curricular activities. And so we collect all the syllabi, look at some of the assignments, even look at some of the policies within the syllabi, look at the co-curricular activities, look at whether the programs require maintenance structures. And then also we look at things like, does the program have a uh, employer or alumni board? And so as I mentioned, that these SLOs often map directly to EQs. And so the assessments that programs are already doing are helpful for determining whether the EQs are being achieved. In terms of something like professionalism, we've seen great examples of individual faculty members having policies about phone use during class, timeliness of assignment submission, and even professional communications with the faculty member. And interestingly, these are things that many employers are saying that new graduates are lacking. So the faculty member doing this is helping prepare the students for success in the workplace. Um, the last bullet, well, the second bullet I'll talk more about later, but we do. Oh, Michelle, can you go back? Or sorry,
Sorry, I'm trying and
is it
getting
going?
cut. There we go.
Yeah. Um, we we look at the rubrics that they use, and often we see reflections of EEQs in them. Obviously, we don't expect the programs we look at to have already implemented the EEQs, but we look at, as I mentioned, connections. And finally, we really look for opportunities for students to apply the EEQs and be assessed on them in work relevant contexts. And this could be an internship or similar activity, but also it could be taking a research paper and condensing it to one page to prepare, to practice for being in a business setting to communicate to non-experts, or it could be doing a project and briefing an external group on the results of the academic work. So we do look for that and we make suggestions um, to help programs implement those opportunities for students. Oh, next slide, please. And so I mentioned rubrics before. I imagine many of you are familiar with the AAC and U value rubrics. They map very well to the EQs. And the middle paragraph here shows the number of different categories that they have rubrics for. And again, there's a very close correlation between what the EQs seek to promote and also what the AAC and U help programs assess. So we've this is one of the things we encourage programs to use if they don't have a good rubric to use for their work. And also we encourage them to use e-portfolios to capture some of the work that they're doing, the students are doing. One, it can be useful for employers, but also it can remind students that much of the work they're doing in the classroom are linked directly to the employability qualities that they will need to be successful in the workforce. Yeah, next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we really encourage programs to to provide opportunities for their students to do internships and those sorts of things. We especially encourage liberal arts programs because they don't have a natural connection that something like nursing would. And the value of this in terms of assessment can be providing the employer some sort of rubric, ideally based on the EQs, and then providing students feedback on what the employer see. And again, this gives students an idea of where they are and what an employer thinks of their ability to apply the EQs and help them prepare a developmental plan as they move towards employment. Um, but also it can help the program figure out if there's any trends and gaps that their students are experiencing as they go out in the workforce. And so we really encourage that. and we think it's really useful for employers to do. And we've seen some examples of programs that provide rubrics for employers to fill out and kind of coach the students after the internship's over as to how they did and what they need to work on and what they did really well, and then also provide that to programs. Next slide. Next slide, please. So, as Michelle mentioned, even though the name is soft skills, most people are still using that. I think there's a shift now. Some are moving away from it, but it implies that they're easy, but they are very difficult to develop. And we we've seen great work in programs in promoting the employability skills, the soft skills that students need, and we think they're much more effective. The repetition in different classes within a discipline and in different disciplines really develops the EEQs better than having a single training on how to communicate or how to think critically without any disciplinary grounding and without a trained faculty member to help do that. Um, and so we found great examples. And also, I think the developing the EEQs in a environment like an undergraduate program prepare students to apply them in different contexts. So for instance, at Amazon, they're famous for not using PowerPoint and requiring six-page memos to communicate ideas in meetings, whereas a lot of other companies will use slides to communicate in meetings. So students will have to have a varied ability to do both, or even to think critically or work in teams. And then also in terms of the other ones like professionalism, students will have to make judgments on what it means to be professional within that organization and the education they receive and the support of faculty helping them achieve the EEQs will prepare them to do that. Um, and also, finally, the last slide, students do tend to overestimate their readiness for the workforce. And so giving them a framework to think about in terms of the EEQs can help them identify where they're strong, where they need to work on the EEQs, and then hopefully by the end of their program, they're prepared for employment and really to impress employers and to be successful in the first year of the job because there are surveys that show that many employers are letting new graduates go within the first 6 months because of many of the reasons relate to EEQs. Okay, next slide. So we begin with the belief that faculty members care about their students, care about their success in the classroom and outside of the classroom, including employment. And we also recognize that most students now pursue degrees to improve their employment opportunities. So we view faculty members as key influencers and who have the ability to promote EEQ development across their courses and then even outside of the classroom. And we help them realize that they're doing that when they don't realize it, but also offer them ways to improve how they're doing it. And so we will suggest minor curriculum adjustments to help them think through maybe a tweak to an assignment that has, as I mentioned before, there's a standard academic research paper, but also a one-page summary for general audience, or briefing a non-academic group on a proposal for a project, coaching them to work well in teams, which is another area that's in the EEQs, and also employers are seeing a gap in what they expect from recent graduates. And really, the EEQ certification, the whole process from beginning of submitting or learning about the EEQs and the standards of care, and then submitting the paperwork, all the information that's required, and then seeing where they're strong and where there's opportunities for improvement can help faculty develop the skills they need to prepare students to succeed in the workforce. And also, I think encouraging faculty to even some of the surveys of employers where they talk about gaps in expectations, the EEQs can kick that sort of inquiry out. So another thing that the QA Commons offers is employability badges, and these are much richer than transcripts because they actually communicate a specific skill, one of the 8 EEQs, and they're all qualities that employers care about. And so the earlier and the more we can promote this sort of awareness of the EEQs and achievement by students, the better prepared they'll be thinking about the preparation for the workforce. And also, it will remind them that what they're learning in the classroom and outside of the classroom is relevant for the workforce, which is, again, the primary reason that most of them are there pursuing degrees. And so, as it notes, they collect these. It's a sense of pride, a sense of achievement, and it really puts an employability face on what they're learning in the classroom, and it will set them apart um, from other graduates who don't have these badges as hiring managers try to make decisions on who to hire for their organization. Next slide,
There we
please.
go.
And so, as I mentioned, we do asset-based coaching. We highlight strengths, inspire confidence, and build momentum by highlighting what they're already doing. Obviously, we do make some suggestions, but really these suggestions are building on the strengths of programs. And again, building on the idea that faculty are experts in their fields and that they care about students and their success before or during their degree program and after graduation as they pursue employment. So I think that's the last slide. So I guess we'll open it up for questions.
Any questions? If not, I'll add a few comments. Do I hear something? All right, I'm going to keep talking until we see any questions, but I'll say so that I wanted to mention that our EEQ certification is a programmatic certification. It's kind of QA Commons' flagship offering. We do other employability projects as well. But in case I fail to set it up, we work at the program level, and one thing that we have noticed is that most colleges and universities have a career services department somewhere on campus, which is fantastic. And I think they're receiving a lot more attention and probably a bit more funding now. But it's still the ratio of students to career services individuals is what is it, 1 to 500, 1 to 1,000, something like that. And so our belief is that we can't leave. Students are coming to college or for the reports show that it's the number one reason students go sign up for post-secondary education. And so if we do a full 2 years or a full 4 years of work, and then we say, oh, and now it's time to get a job, go over to this office, and spend 20 minutes with someone. It sort of, it doesn't make sense to us. And so our theory is this stuff, all of this employability work is actually happening in the classroom, probably a lot more than most faculty realize. So we're trying to kind of elevate that and connect some dots and make some connections. And right, it's there. And absolutely, we do make suggestions to programs that we work with. Hey, have you ever thought about this? We've seen another program do this. So we're offering advice, but we're not going in with like there's a chat. Everything is terrible and change everything you do. We're actually doing a lot of elevating. And here's a question that says, do you have data on what employers think of the badges and certification? The short answer is no. And the longer answer is we're working on that. So we are currently, the grants are not quite signed yet, but we have 2 pretty exciting projects looking to measure that. And so hopefully that will be happening in the next couple of years, and we'll be reporting out on that. One is well, let's see. I will say, there is some data that does show that those badges do allow faculty and students to better articulate the skills that they're learning. There is at least one really solid study on that. We're working on what employers think. One we're doing with at the 4-year college level, hopefully doing if things all proceed as planned, is actually to look at how whether actually with whether it helps with completion. And we've got another study. Articulation is huge. I'm going to go into that again in a second. So thank you for whoever wrote this. But we do have another project that is directly work or supposed to, if it's signed, work with employers. And we have a partnership with SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management, to really investigate that. So we're not there yet, but we're working on it. And let me see this question here. Articulation is huge. Thanks for your transparency. I want to go into that more. Articulation is huge. If you have a skill, here's an example. We have done a bunch of work with the American Historical Association, and I was at their conference and talking with a faculty member, and she said, "Oh, I like this." She says, "You know, I do some things with my students, and we work on their resumes, and all they can figure out how to do is write down that they worked as a barista at Starbucks last summer." And it's like, oh my God, it's just a shame, because these are students who are at conferences, giving poster presentations, engaging at a high level with other faculty members. Like, that is a real workplace skill. They don't know that they have a workplace skill. They certainly can't take it into an interview and talk about it. And that's why we think that, so at the program, we started just with the certification, but we've added these student employability badges because we recognize that students need to be able to see it, not just, I'm going to keep going back to history because it's such a good example, but there were projects before, we know history students are good critical thinkers. Well, a new graduate pushed on that in an interview can't take it very far. Like, what do you mean? I don't know. How could they know? They've never been in the workplace. But what we do is we issue these student employability badges, and we say, here are the skills I developed. I am a good thinker or a communicator or a team worker. And this is the activity that I did to develop this skill. And now I'm going to bring this to you, Mr. or Mrs. Employer. That's a whole other thing. And I think there's articulation. And then I think just going back to awareness. And that's going to help, I think, as people sort of, move through their careers. If communication is so important, I feel like this is who I was as a young employee. All these things that are important, but I didn't know. I just didn't. And I did stupid things, and I stepped on toes because I just wasn't aware. Right. But once I became aware, because maybe someone finally pulled me aside to tell me, I could recognize these things in the workplace and begin to work on them. So we have to make those connections for students and allow them to articulate things and be aware of them. Love SHRM too, someone says. I'm going to keep reading these. I've heard it can be difficult for students to feel ownership over their skills, to be okay with saying they have it, and that gets into what the skill means, how it's transferable across contexts, etc. I think it is hard, and that's what we're trying to work on. I will say, I think there's work to be done at the employer level and at the HR level, and helping HR managers sort of recognize those skills a little bit better. But yeah, that's what we're working on. Anything else, Chris, or any other comments, questions?
No, I think then that is why we hope to get them in work-related opportunities so that they have the experience and they make the connection between what they learned in the classroom and demonstrating thinking and communication in a work context,
Yeah.
so that they think about transferability.
I will say that internships have gotten a lot of attention, and I think that there's a Harvard project on workforce kind of shows that it's really the most I don't want to say promising, but it's kind of like the number one thing that you can do is an internship. And we agree, because the workplace is different than a college or a university. So we agree with that. And where we would like to take it next is really using our essential employability qualities to attach employer to do employer assessments with our essential employability qualities in those internships. We have one program that we've worked with who does the most amazing internship program, and it's, I mean, you name it. They've thought of everything from the students doing the real research on what internship they want, to reaching out, to reflecting on things as they go through the internship, all the way to, you know, sending thank you notes at the end of the internship. And so that's a little bit different than our EEQ certification project, but one place that I think we'd really like to go is kind of use all of those best practices that this certified program of ours does in their internships, and kind of work on, hey, and yeah, let's really think about how we can have students reflect on the EEQs as they go through their internship, and then also have employers kind of give feedback on that. That's, I think, an exciting